This is a story I would never forget. Something, until this day, I just can't believe. It all started on a summer break of college. For most people, they had plans and grand adventures to go on. Not me though. I didn't come from money, and for the most part I was okay with that. At least I wasn't alone. I had my best friend Jason. We grew up together. Jason was an outgoing person, and I was basically the opposite. I guess having a friend like this makes sure your life isn't that boring. I was in my room typing away on the first day of summer break. I know it doesn't seem that exciting, but like I said before, I wasn't going anywhere. Jason kicked open my door like it was in the middle of a drug bus. It made me jump, almost jumping my laptop, which of course made him laugh. We talked for a bit, and he was trying to convince me that this summer would be different than all the others. This was his thing, grand speeches. I would usually shrug off one of these speeches, but this time it was different. I looked at these four walls and thought to myself, it has to be different this year. He left my room, and a part of his speech really stuck with me. Don't just look at life, live it. I stood up and headed out. Jason was waiting for me on the steps outside. As soon as I took my first step, he said, "See, it's not that bad, right?" I shook my head and laughed. I asked him, "What are we gonna do since you dragged me out of my comfort zone?" He smiled and said, "The first step is a simple one. Enjoy the weather." We walked for a few minutes until Jason pointed out an ice cream shop. I'm not gonna lie, it was very hot that day. So when he pointed it out, it was a relief. We sat there for a while eating our ice cream. Jason started talking about how he enjoyed the simple moments of life, which I found curious because he was always the life of the party. He told me, we all have to grow up one day. There was a sadness there, but before I could say anything, he stood up and threw his ice cream away. He was ready to be on the move again, and I followed. We walked for a few minutes before a paper stapled on a tree caught our attention. The paper mentioned a garage sale. I wasn't that excited about it, but Jason was. So when he said we should go, I said I guess so. Before I could take another step, Jason stopped in his track and said, "That's the problem. You're always so hesitant. This is the summer for none of that." I nodded my head in determination, ready for any adventure ahead of us. He put his arm around my shoulder and said, "See, it's not that bad." Going to the garage sale did work out though, since I only had $25. It was a 5-minute walk until we saw the house. It was a rustic looking house, something that came from the 1950s. There was an elderly woman standing just behind the table, talking to people. I figured she was the one in charge, and I was right. Jason and I walked up to the table and she said hi. Before I could say anything, Jason did what he did. He jumped in front of me and introduced us both. You see, I didn't mind when he did this for the most part because he was the icebreaker. Her name was Bridget, and she asked if we had any questions not to hesitate and ask, and that everything here is for sale. Jason walked away to look at what was around while I noticed the moving truck. I know it's none of my business, but I asked her about it. She told me that her and her husband were looking for a change of scenery. I didn't see her husband, so I assumed he wasn't there at the moment. I said it was nice to meet you and walked to Jason. We looked around and it was pretty much what you expected. A bunch of stuff that no one wanted. We were about to walk away until something caught Jason's eye. It was a wooden box, but it was strange. There was this wax all around it, sealing it up. I found it weird, but Jason said, "I don't know why, but I have to get this." I was confused, but if he wanted this box covered with wax, then who am I to get in the way? We ran to Bridget asking how much it was. She had this worried look about her. She told us that she didn't know how that got there. She went to reach for it, but Jason pulled back. I told him to give it back. He looked at me and said, "Yeah, you're right." As soon as she went to reach for it again, Jason took off. There was another difference between Jason and I. He was a track star and I wasn't, so there was no way of me catching him. I walked up to Bridget and apologized for Jason. She didn't say anything though. She gave me a weird smile and said, "I guess it's not my problem anymore." Before I could say another word, she turned away and started to walk towards her home. I stood there not knowing how to react. I snapped out of it when I realized that Jason had still stolen something. I walked back to the dorm and I thought Jason would be on the front steps waiting for me, but he wasn't. I shrugged my shoulders and headed up towards my room. I opened up the door and the strangest thing happened. The box that Jason had stole was on my bed. I walked up to the box and reached for it, but before I could, Jason touched my back, causing me to yell. He thought it was the funniest thing ever, but I didn't. I asked why he stole the box and he said, I had to. It was calling out for me. I shook my head and called him weird. I picked up the box, which made him jump a little. I asked him if he was okay, but all he talked about was being careful with the box. I threw the box at him and he panicked. All I saw was a box of wax. I guess he saw something different. I pointed out to these markings on the side of the box, which I didn't notice before. I wanted to get a closer look at it, but when I went to reach for it, he yanked it back like he did before. He apologized and slowly handed it over, like he was regretting his decision to do so. I sat on my bed, putting the box to the side. I opened my laptop to see what I could find out. While I was trying to figure out the markings, I looked at the box. This dark feeling rushed through my body. It's going to take a while before I can figure out all these markings. He screamed no and snatched the box off my bed. I asked, how am I supposed to figure it out if you won't let me? We came up with a deal of sorts. Since he wasn't going to let me hold on to the box, then I would just take pictures of the markings. After I was done with the pictures, he left my room without saying a word. I had no idea what was wrong with him. I wanted to check on him, but I decided to give him his space. I put all the pictures through a program to decipher images and languages. I hope it doesn't take that long. As I was waiting for my research to be done, I dozed off. I had this dream that felt so real. I woke up in the dream and I saw my body still lying down. I decided to walk to Jason's room. I opened the door and I saw Jason sitting right next to his box. There was someone standing behind him though, but I couldn't see who it was. So when I went in closer to get a better look, this person had his head down, but when I stepped closer, this person's head snapped up like I was tripping an alarm. I fell back on the floor. When I tried to see this person's face, all I could see was red eyes. I tried to talk and yell out to Jason, but nothing came out. This thing started moving towards me, but I felt paralyzed. The only thing I could do was close my eyes. I could hear the cracking of bones, which kept getting closer. Then there was no noise. I didn't want to, but I opened my eyes and this thing grabbed my arm. It felt like it was on fire. I woke up screaming. I sat up trying to catch my breath and I noticed my arm was red. I touched it and it felt warm. The laptop beeped. I looked at it and it was done translating what was on the side of the box. It said, "Please do not open. Do not release Asmodeus." I was confused because I waited all that time and it gave me less than 10 words. I looked up the name and apparently it's demonic, which is definitely not a good sign. I looked up the box and it was made to trap these entities. They called it a Dybbuk box. This can't be true. I must be losing my mind. I looked outside and it was already dark. How did I lose that much time? Wait, could that thing behind Jason in my dream, could that be Asmodeus? I have to get rid of the box. Maybe things will go back to normal. Suddenly I heard this scream. It made me stand up. I walked to the door and I felt like I was having a heart attack. When I touched the doorknob, the pain stopped. I didn't want to open the door, but I heard another scream and my instincts took over. When I did, the lights turned off and an alarm started ringing. It was hard to see because the only light source were the red flashing lights on the walls. The ringing of the alarm stopped and there was no sound. Jason stepped out one of the dorm rooms, with blood all over his shirt and a knife. He turned his head towards me and said, "Hello, brother." It looked like him, but there was a deepness to his tone that wasn't. He completely turned towards me and said nothing. I asked, "What did you do?" He looked at the room he walked out of and then looked at me. He said, "You know my name, don't you?" I didn't know what to say. He repeated himself over and over again, so much that it started to sound like nails on a chalkboard. The sound was too much. It brought me to my knees as I held my head. I screamed out the first thing that I could think of. Asmodeus. He stopped repeating himself. I stood up and said, "Let him go." He stood quiet and smiled. He said, "You want to save him? Come here. I guess I have no choice." I walked towards him. When I came close, he took the knife and stabbed himself. All I could do was yell no. I caught him before he hit the floor. I took the knife and threw it away. I looked at him and all I could think is, why would it stab the body it wanted? Before I could gather my thoughts, all I could hear was someone yelling behind me. I turned around and I saw a police officer yelling freeze. I tried to explain what was going on, but they wouldn't listen. I was slammed on the floor and arrested. I was thrown in the back of a police car. I looked out of the window and couldn't believe what I saw. It was Jason and that woman Bridget standing side by side waving at me. The following weeks I went to court and told them what happened, which landed me in the asylum for the criminally insane. Until this day I can't understand what really happened. Was he really possessed? Or was it a mental breakdown? Who could tell the difference, really?